I'm Cameron, this is Carsideration, and today we have a 1986 Porsche 944. So how did I find this graphite metallic 86 944? First of all, graphite metallic, very rare color for the 944, but I found this at Road America. I go every year for the sports car weekend, and I saw this beautifully clean 944 that was probably one of the most clean ones I've ever seen, either online or in person. So I put my little YouTube business card in there, and a gentleman by the name of Austin, who lives in the Detroit area, only 2 hours away from me, happens to own it. He's a younger gentleman, 24 years old, and this has a pretty cool story. He has every single piece of documentation for this 944. It is going to go up for sale here soon, and I wanted to get it on the channel before it leaves his ownership. So I'm going to show you some B-roll footage of that at his house, but he has every single maintenance record from the day this thing was like brand new, which is awesome. So with that being said, this is going to be a car review, but it's also going to be kind of like a 944 buyer's guide and things to look out for if you are looking for a 944. So 80s cars, I think everyone can agree that the 80s wasn't the best for vehicle design. Probably the most memorable thing is going to be the pop-up headlights, but what I love about this 944 is that I think it has stood the test of time. At the time they were released, if you were a kid in the 90s, you absolutely loved these. We actually just had a group of 2 guys on mountain bikes come over here, and they were drooling over this vehicle. And they were just like, dude, I remember when I was in high school or when I was a kid, these things were the shit. There's a doctor down the road that had the 944 from us, and then the 924, which this is based off of, was the poor man's Porsche, but this is the Porsche that we wanted. So it was actually really cool because seeing videos and reading articles, they're talking about the nostalgia in this car, and just witnessing those 2 guys just come up here and drooling over this was one of the coolest things that I've gotten to experience while reviewing cars. And it's been a very busy day in this park today, and there's been a lot of people that have been coming by, giving thumbs up. And I don't think you can get that out of a lot of 80s cars, but the 944, you do get that. So with that being said, let's run into a few quick stats on this, and then we'll jump into the exterior and the interior review. So a few quick stats on this 1986 Porsche 944. It does have a 2.5 liter inline 4, makes about 150 horsepower, 142 foot-pounds of torque, around 3,000 RPM. 0 to 60 is 9 seconds, but some Porsche literature says 8.3. So I guess it depends on how good of a driver you are. Now, like I said, this does have nearly perfect 50-50 weight distribution. It's 50.7 front, 49.3 rear. Now, these were produced from 1982 to 1991. There's 163,000 units produced worldwide. And this was the most successful Porsche model up until the Boxster came out. Now, 1982 to 1989, this is a 1986. There was 113,070 units produced, and out of that 113,000, 56,921 got exported to the United States. So this vehicle, as spec'd, because Austin does have the original sticker for it, $28,710, which roughly comes out to about $72,600. So even in 1986, this was not a cheap vehicle. Now, the good thing about these vehicles is you can pick them up nowadays. They are making a comeback in the recent market. 5 or 10 years ago, you could have got them for dirt cheap. And a lot of vehicles, a lot of 944s were used and abused and thrown away. This is a very good example of one that has been driven 101,000 miles, so about 3,000 miles a year for the course of its life, give or take. But it is so well preserved. There are very few issues here. So you can get into one of these for anywhere between $10,000 to $25,000 if you found a turbo version with limited miles. I've seen someone bring a trailer for $70,000, but there's only 2. Everything beyond that, a few above 30, but you're gonna be right in that $10,000 to $25,000 ballpark. Starting from the back, I love this design. The wide body is probably my favorite, matched with this wing. Now this wing, once you get close, it's rubber. It's really kind of interesting. A few other things here on the exterior. You will notice there's a little diamond type thing right here. Now that is also a jack point, but it also is where that is the perfect 50-50 weight distribution for this vehicle. Another thing to note here on the side, this did not come with a anti-theft device. If you're looking at a 944 and there's an extra key fob here, that means that it did come standard with or optioned out with the anti-theft device. So this one obviously didn't. There's no key here. And this door handle is actually quite interesting here. There's like a little trigger like that. And oh, the door is insanely heavy. And honestly, the first thing you notice if you get into a 944, if you never have like I did, listen to this door close. I barely touched it. It's like Austin said, the owner, it's like a German bank vault. And it's so satisfying. Now, while we're in here, one interesting little feature, you cannot lock the car. If you want to get out and leave your car and just press this lock down, you can't do it. So you have to shut it, then you have to grab the key and lock it from here. So if you tried it, like right now, you could reach in, still not gonna work, or you just have to actually manually lock the door. So there is a right and wrong way to close a Porsche hood. I don't know if my GoPro is gonna pick this up, but there is a dent right here from somebody not closing it right. So instead of slamming the hood down or anything like that, you let it fall into place, and then you take your two knuckles and you put it right on the seam and push down. And I've never heard of that before, but I think you can see it right there. There is a dent from somebody that did it incorrectly. So make sure you close your Porsche with two knuckles on the seam. So one thing that Porsche did very well with this 944, the galvanizing of the frame and all the metal is amazing, but they also did, if you can see down here, they did a solid coat of rubber all completely underneath the vehicle as well. Inside the wheel wells, it's all plastic. So unless you're absolutely dead set on your 944, if you're looking for one, if you see rust, pretty much run away, because these vehicles are, again, they're coming back, they're getting a little bit higher price in the market, but you can still get in them for relatively cheap. So if you see one with rust, you might as well just go find another one, because that means it's probably just used and abused and daily driven. Now this one was daily driven, but it doesn't see a lot of rain. And as I'll show you with the maintenance records, not a single thing is missing here. There's very, very few cosmetic details. Now this vehicle actually will be going up for sale. It's probably going to be on Bring a Trailer soon. So definitely check back there in a few weeks or so. And once it's up there, you can see all the high def photos of everything. But this thing is so clean and I love it. The rear, obviously, going to be everybody's favorite part of the vehicle with the hatch and things like that. One thing we're going to chat about is, main thing on this hatch, it's starting to delaminate here. No matter what year your 944 is, this is going to happen at some point. It's not a huge deal, but if you're going to look at one, just make sure the glass isn't popped out. And another cool little thing, gas cap. Gas cap right here, it's locked. Got to have the key, but it has a little like leather strap that goes over it. Kind of interesting. But yeah, other than that, there's not a whole lot going on the exterior. Four-wheel disc brakes. Love the pop-up headlights, which obviously we're going to pop those up here in a second. Let's get to the interior. All right, so interior, honestly, there's not a whole lot going on. A few interesting things though. Upgraded stereo system, Continental, so Bluetooth. So you have the modern convenience of having a Bluetooth, but it still looks somewhat period correct. You have a clock here and a lap timer, you know, cigarette lighter. This is actually for your climate control. There's a little fan in here that sucks in air, so it can adjust your automatic climate control in here. But interesting thing is, when you're behind the driver's seat, a lot of this whole dash is just going by feel, because you can't see a lot of it, especially on the other side of the steering wheel here, where you have, this is where you pop up your headlights, and then your dim switch, and then your fogs and things like that. So it is a lot of just go by feel type interior. And of course down here, when everyone smoked in the 80s, got a little ashtray. This interior is so clean. Down here in front of the shifter, we have your moonroof or sunroof, whichever you want to call it. And then your rear wiper, which really is pretty much pointless. And then this controls which mirror you're going to adjust. So left, that's gonna be driver's, that's gonna be passenger. And then you have your little knob right over here to adjust them. And as you can tell, no cup holders, but the place where you put your cups or drinks, bottled water only, right down there. Well, this was ordered. This is manually adjusting seats, but down here you can like tilt the seat up and down. Now, if you spec'd it out however you wanted to, you could get heated seats or manual seats down here as well, but this one just has like the tilt feature, I guess you could say. And it still works. And these seats are the base seats. Very comfortable so far when I was driving it. But we're about to take it on the road, and Austin will definitely continue to give us the full down low on the 944 and this vehicle specifically. Now, back seats. I'm not gonna crawl back there. It is very tight, but not a whole lot going on. It does feel like a fishbowl in here because that back hatch window glass is so big. But Austin did say that his friend did sit back here. He had 3 buddies in the car, but his friend was 6'2". You can manually remove this moonroof, sunroof, whichever you want to call it. You can fit people back here. It's just, it's fairly tight, So again, this car is just incredibly clean. So this just folds down from the left, but you know, if you want to throw golf clubs in here, plenty of room for golf clubs. This thing is very practical. It looks small, you know, it is a fairly small vehicle, but with this hatch and this laying down, you do have ample amount of space to put groceries or whatever you want to do in here. If you want to daily drive it during the summer, autocross it, whatever you want to do. This car is just so practical, which I never really realized until I got in here and started looking at everything. He's going to walk us through how to take out the moonroof, sunroof, whichever you want to call it.
So in normal operation with the key in the on position, you can open it by pressing the up button and it tilts up like we've seen, and then down closes it to the lock position. But if you want to take it out, you need to be in the accessory position, press the up button to retract the arms, undo the 2 clips above the sun visor. Now you can turn the car off at this point and open your hatch. You have to reach in and pull up on the panel, and then it slots off of there, and then it stows in the trunk. If your car still has a sunroof bag that hasn't decomposed, you can put it in there. I usually just put a towel down so I don't get black on my tan carpet. And then it stows in the trunk between the fuel filler, the tire well, and the spare tire in the back.
Easy peasy. It's hot, dude.
And this thing cools down pretty fast once you get it going.
E-brake is down on your left, by the way. It's kind of weird, but there's that. This does have, would you say variable power steering?
Yeah, in the factory brochure, right, for your different speeds, it gives you a little bit different force. It is rather stiff at low speeds.
Yeah, because like just then I'm like, it almost feels like there's no power steering, but it is easy, but
once you're going, once you're at speed, it makes sense, right? Porsche is very well known for their hydraulic power steering systems. They're very, very responsive. They give you very good feedback, probably more so than any other car from the time. I would say it's pretty good. Modern electric systems cut out over 40 miles an hour, so you get purely mechanical. That's why modern cars feel nice and heavy on the highway.
Okay.
Which is what you want at speed, right? You really only need boost for your steering at low speeds in the parking lot, which is why they've gone to electric.
We were talking earlier, you said the #1 thing to replace is the fuel lines.
Yes.
Can you explain to people why you need to check the fuel lines on 944s?
Sure. When they left the factory, it was just a simple rubber high-pressure fuel hose, nothing uncommon here. But in 1991 or so, don't quote me on the date, this car had it done. I have the envelope from it. There was a recall campaign to put a protective jacket over the outside of the original lines. And what happens is the fuel lines run over the top of the exhaust header, basically. Not close to it, about 6 inches, but
right over the top. It's
still in the hot zone of the engine. And after, this car's 36 years old, so the older ones are pushing 40 now. 40-year-old rubber and fuel and heat is a recipe for disaster. So it's quite common every summer, usually 1 or 2 of these things goes up in smoke.
Ugh.
Just because.
Could you imagine watching your car?
I would cry. Let's put it this way. It doesn't make a ton of power. It can get out of its own way, but...
Did I go to second? No. Okay. I was scared I was going to second.
But it's not an off-the-line car. You're not going to win any drag races.
Right.
A base model Ultima would eat you alive from a red light, but a base model Ultima isn't made to cruise down the Autobahn at 28 miles an hour, sustained like this car could. And you found the next problem I'll talk about.
Yeah.
That is really the only problem this car suffers from. The shift fork and the shift shaft are worn on 5th gear. It's not uncommon. It's most common on gears 2 and 4, so your 1-2 selector fork or your 3-4.
Right.
This car just happens to be on 5, so it's worn out the synchro. It has 101,000 miles. If you and as when we drove out here, Cameron watched me do it, and we'll get to it eventually. If you put the clutch in on your shift from 4 to 5 and just let the RPMs drop to idle, it slots in without much protest.
You can see a lot in this, like the rear hatch, amazing visibility.
This car rewards a slow shift.
That's kind of what, when I was watching you drive it over here, you weren't shifting, super slow, but you're just like taking your time in between your gates. You're just like, okay, here you go, here you go. So I have noticed, obviously, these seats are very comfortable. You and I are skinnier guys. These are the base seats.
These are the base seats.
Cool.
These seats are designed by Recaro. You can find sports seats. People ask a pretty penny for them.
Right.
Aesthetically, they look cooler because you got the big bolster.
Yeah.
But it's just harder to get in and out of them. Here we've got a corner, right? Demoing our seat bolsters. Works out perfectly.
And okay, so that was okay. If we were a rally driver, right, and you're my co-driver, you would say like right 3 long. So it's not a 90-degree corner. We're going 50. That would probably be like a right 4. But it feels balanced. Like the steering feels a little bit lighter from the parking lot, but I like the heavier steering feel.
This is a base car. It's a non-turbo. It has 15-inch wheels, so you have a big sidewall.
Right, little spongy.
Were big in the 80s, right? That was a big wheel. In the 16s on the turbo, that was, oh my gosh, that was unimaginable back then. But if you really do want to make this thing
autocrossy.
Yeah, I've autocrossed it on the 15s. There's a lot of sidewall. It lays the tire over.
Yeah.
It's the fact of life.
I wonder how it's going to feel, actually driving it versus sitting in the passenger seat, but it's not like, okay, first of all, this ride's way better than my Focus RS, like a million times better. And it feels, I would say, equivalently balanced, even without the, just the rear wheel drive.
This is a very touchy driveline. The original cars came with a clutch, and it had rubber pucks on it, which is not uncommon to use. Corvettes use something like that. But that soaked up a lot of the driveline. I don't want to say lash, but the tautness in it, it made it a little more
kind of like bounces.
Yeah. You notice in a parking lot in 1st gear.
Yeah.
So if you find a car that has an original clutch, it certainly needs to be done regardless of the rare, because like I said, if it's an older car, it's 40 years old, and 40-year-old rubber, I don't care if it's been in a climate-controlled garage, it's 40-year-old rubber, it's breaking down, and it'd be a pretty bad day to completely explode the clutch, which does happen.
A lot of people just, RX-7?
Oh yeah, look at that.
This has RX-7 vibes. I was going to say that, but I just couldn't remember, like, RX-7 or RX-8.
This was, Mazda used the 944 as a benchmark.
They really? Okay, well that makes sense for the RX-7 then.
They didn't get close enough. Sorry, RX-7 fans.
Yeah. Not every 944 is going to be as well documented, and I would say as well taken care of as yours, because as we said earlier, they were so cheap for so long. Not that they're not cheap now, but they're just going up in value.
Yep.
I don't think they're ever going to get to the 60s, 70s, 911s, $100,000 or whatever. But since they were so cheap for so long, there's a lot of people that had them that just kind of daily drove them, used them and abused them, and just threw them away.
914s were the same way.
914s were the same way. Okay.
This is an expensive car to keep going. There's no other way to slice it. You can save a lot by doing it yourself.
And buying non-OE Porsche stuff, but still OE Porsche stuff
Well,
in a roundabout way?
Yes and no. Porsche, this is a good point, actually, I wanted to bring up. Porsche will sell you all of the parts for this car, most of them, which also means that there's going to be a number of aftermarket parts available. And there's a number of different sites you can get parts on.
Right.
I will plug Pelican Parts 944 online, Paragon Parts, Flyhammer sells used parts. I have a list. We'll do that in a B-roll. But
We can put it in the description too for
you have
anybody.
the ability to shop around for price. That's what I'm trying to say. These cars have been around long enough that you can, through the forums and through the 944 Facebook group, which is a fantastic car group, by the way, the best I've ever been in. Everyone follows the rules about being polite and not being a jackwagon. There's enough people that'll give you tips like, yeah, this is cheaper, but this is junk, or yeah, no, this is a case where you can get by with a non-OEM part. My tip to you is to buy the best you can afford. Keeping them going, I think we were talking about that a little bit before.
Yeah.
There's plenty of owner resources. Pelican Parts has a lot of really good tech articles written up, pictures, what to do. This car came with a Haynes manual, which is only $23, right? That's gotten me out of the water more times than I can say. And also, the 944 community is very good about helping out if you got a question.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask. So, in the history on this car, the air conditioning was converted to R134A by the previous owner years ago. And it blows, as you saw before when we got in the car, very cold.
Yes.
If your car hasn't yet, it would have been R12. You're going to have to update it. You can't get R12 anymore. So yeah, air conditioning was converted to R134A, runs reliably. The climate control works perfectly. The sunroofs in these cars, this is an early 86, so I have the old style sunroof motor. It's tucked in the back on the driver's side in the trunk. They're a finicky system to keep going. I slayed the dragon. It took me almost a couple years to get it to run reliably, and I did, and I was very proud of that because it wasn't working when I bought the car. But just know that if it doesn't work, it's not uncommon. The same can be said for cruise control. These are old school servo-based unit. There's a computer in the driver's side footwell on the left side, kind of tucked up under the dash. A lot of times the solder joints in those crack, or the servo unit under the hood goes out. It's just something to be concerned about. Oh, timing belt and water belt.
Okay, yeah.
That's probably the biggest known problem with a 944. It's a maintenance item. Every 4 years, or no more than 30,000 miles if you put miles on your car like that.
Whoa.
You got to replace the timing belt, and while you're in there, you might as well do the water pump for the extra little bit of time and the extra little bit of money for parts. It just keeps them running reliably. It's a job you can do yourself if you're concerned about that. It was done before I bought it, and last summer I had to have it done.
This is why I wanted you in the car while I was driving it, because you have so much knowledge about not only this specific car, because it's yours, but just the 944 in general. And when you get to older cars, there's so much nuance to things to them, especially like you said, either at their earliest they're 30 years old, or they're really pushing 40 years old. There's a lot of little things that can go on that if you're not deep in that community, there's no way I would ever know about any of those things.
And a lot of these I didn't know when I was buying the car, so
you just learned as you went.
Exactly. And if I'm looking to sell the car, a lot of good this information does me, right?
Well, yeah. And whoever buys this car from you when it goes up for sale, you're the perfect owner. Say how much money you've put into this since your ownership, so people know why it looks like this.
True. So I bought the car with a manila folder that resembled a phone book, and it certainly does now. The previous owner put a lot of care into the car. If it needed something, it got it. But it also got driven, right? So there's things you could run around the car and drop $1 million on it, replacing absolutely everything. But it's been kept up to the point where, you know, it's not falling apart. So
Yeah.
I was able to buy it and drive it reliably, but also kind of plan out when I wanted to do things. I put about $9,000 into this car, so about $3,000 a year, and I didn't have to do all of that. A lot of it was little things like
preventative almost, right?
preventative, or like there was a trim plug missing on the inside. Okay, I want that fixed up. Right, one of the window switches would stick. Okay, I kind of want the window switch to be reliable, so if someone doesn't have to look down and pay attention.
The term driving a slow car fast is better than driving a fast car slow. I already get that sense on the highway because like I feel like my foot is into the throttle pretty steady, like, and we're at 78, not going the fastest, but you said that when you're driving, all of a sudden you look down, you're going 95 because you're like, come on, because like it's not when you put your foot in, you're not like, whoa, it's just like, is anything happening? And then you're like, oh, I am going 90.
It's not the fastest car in the world, and you kind of know that, so I've got myself in a few situations where it's going way faster than I should.
Or noticed,
because it is a very smooth driving car, and you really don't notice the speed, and you put your foot in it because you know it's kind of slow.
Yeah. Well, what I think about, because like I went on this kick for a while to where I wanted like an earlier 911, and got on that train way too late. I don't think I could ever, I mean, I don't know if I could justify $100,000 on a, 70s 911. Then again, I'm like, man, that'd be really cool because in 30 years, probably be worth $1 million. Not really, but like with this price point where the market is right now, with this one, I would say probably, not going to be $10,000, obviously, the way it's maintained and everything. It's going to be on the higher end of that, but this thing drives really straight. It's, like I said earlier, it rides way better than my RS. The road noise isn't terrible. Like, these bumps at, 80 miles an hour are a little loud, but we are in an 86 vehicle. It's not brand new.
And these are the fabulous Michigan roads.
Yeah, great Michigan roads here in Detroit.
I drove it to school before it would snow in the falls for a couple weeks to a month, and that's okay. The cost of keeping it that reliable was the maintenance that I put into it, but it's good for that. That's the thing, and it's comfortable enough to take on trips. That's what I wanted it for. If you grew up in the era, you probably wanted one of these. Yeah. My dad did. I never knew that until I showed up at home with the car and he drove it. And
it's like secretly like, dang it.
I have wanted to drive one of these since I was, in my 20s, in the 80s.
That's awesome. God, can you imagine living in like North Carolina or West Virginia with one of these? Like, this would be an absolute riot to go take down the back roads.
It is.
Or Salt Lake City, like anywhere like that.
Something with a lot of curves. This car is the epitome of driving a slow car fast. You get to drive around with your foot planted to the floor most of the time. You're not breaking the speed limit. You're not putting people at risk. Speed is relative, right? It's the experience of it. You're low to the ground.
That is one thing. We are very low. And not that it's like a, Formula One, but I feel like I am leaned back a little bit more. My feet are further out in front of me. Like it's not like a typical American driving position, I would say. If you're driving an 86 American vehicle, I don't think you'd be seated in this position. The other thing I noticed too, regardless of like age, this thing gets a lot of looks.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it's because like you're a younger guy and we're filming it, but everyone's like, no, it's definitely the car. And especially with a little bit older than us, 40 plus year olds, they're just looking. Every time they drove by, we had to stop to, let the car drive by so the mic wouldn't pick it up. They're just looking and staring and like slowing down, and they're like, what? That is the cleanest 944 I think I've ever seen. Not a lot's happening, but I can feel it trying to build.
That's the problem. You put your foot in it to get going again if you slow down, and then you kind of don't realize, because it's relatively quiet for an 80s car. Not quiet by modern car standards, and it's smooth, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute.
But the noise it makes, it is a good noise. One thing that I wasn't expecting, I was expecting more noise out of the front of the vehicle, obviously.
Yep.
But I actually am hearing more noise out of the rear than I thought I would. And it kind of, it keeps trying to trick my mind that there's an engine mounted back there, even though I know there's not.
It's the hatch. You get the resonance from it.
Exactly.
You know, if you really do want to make it modern car quiet, you could do that for a relatively small investment. It's just a matter of how far you want to go with it. I think it's fine. I can live with it.
Yeah.
You know, we're conversing in here. We're not shouting at each other and
Right.
doing the speed limit on the highway. So, yeah.
Awesome, dude. Appreciate it.
No
Thank
problem.
you so much. 944, it's home safe, back in her place. But some of the improvements that Austin has done, it's a throttle cam, short throw shifter, that Bluetooth head unit that I mentioned earlier. The conies, which originally came on them, they're also adjustable. The extra tail lights here, let's go back. US spec and Euro spec tail lights were a little bit different. So there was kind of a dead space, but he updated them to where it's just one solid brake light now. So that definitely looks better. Solid state DME relay as well. Cabin air filter, which he said was awesome and really helped with reducing the dust. Guys, just look how clear this glass is. It's spotless. And then last thing that you notice in the pop-up headlights, he does have LED headlamps in there now. So this car is ready to rock. If you want to buy it, check out Bring a Trailer, throw in a bid. It's probably going to go up there. And with that being said, appreciate you checking out the video. Hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you in the next video.